G-Man Boxing. Do you know what I mean? Every single live he donates. I see him on other lives donating. He's got the bag on it.
Morning, people. So last night, Gary Russell Jr. had his first fight in basically 2 years, almost 2 years. I think it was the start of February 2020 was when he had his last fight. He had his fight against Magsayo last night, and Gary Russell Jr. suffered a loss on points. I watched it this morning. It was a very close fight. If you had it a draw or you had it to Russell, I wouldn't complain. I agree with the decision of Magsayo winning the fight. I thought that he was definitely the busier of the two. Now, Gary Russell Jr. definitely had an injury to his hand, and I think to his shoulder as well. More so the shoulder, it looked like. Now, Magsayo started out very quick, and that would have a lot to do with the fact that he's been active. You know, the commentary team on Showtime made reference to the fact that Magsayo has had 3 fights in the space of time where Russell Jr. has had 1 fight. And Russell Jr., we know, even before, for the last few years, pretty much since 2014, he's been painfully inactive. He's really reduced himself to fighting once a year. And obviously, he's not been out of the ring. He's been out of the ring for nearly 2 years. So even when he's out of the ring for a year, you do see the ring rust. Like, there's certain fights that Gary Russell Jr. has had, in the past where he has started slow. I remember in 2017, the guy's name now escapes me. I don't think it was Kiko. I forget. No, it wasn't Kiko Martinez. It was the year after. But he fought someone in 2017, and it was very kind of. He won it, but it was a very slow start to that, and that was again coming from a time where he'd been again inactive for over a year. So with Russell starting out slow in this fight, I didn't really think too much of it. Came back into his own in the 3rd round and in the 4th round, but the 4th round was pivotal in this fight. Now, I actually thought when I looked at it originally that Russell was hurt from a right hand that Magsayo was landing, because he was having a lot of success. Like, he was landing right hands, he was getting very close to uppercut at times. He was having a lot of success as well with the uppercut. Actually, some of them weren't landing flush on Russell, but they were still finding a way through, if you get me, to the point where they were kind of landing on his kind of almost his chest region, because Russell was tucking down. But it looked like Russell was buzzing the 4th round. But when you actually look at it back, I think that was the moment where I think it was his shoulder more so that was injured, because you can see his arm, his right arm, which is his jabbing arm, kind of drops a little bit. And I don't mean as in like he drops it as in, just drop a hand. It was like it just sagged down. And I reckon that moment there was when probably the injury occurred. Now, Russell, one of the reasons why I do think he has been inactive over the years is that it's been known for many, many years now that Russell has very brittle hands. I mean, when you see Gary Russell in training, this is a featherweight who's training in 20-ounce gloves, when he's just doing the pads. That's very unusual to see a welterweight training in 20-ounce gloves like that. You would see probably heavyweights and stuff like that from time to time do it. But welterweight, I should say, or featherweight, I should say. What was I saying? Welterweight. But it's very rare you see a featherweight in gloves that big. Because Russell has such brittle hands, he's hurt them in several fights. There's fights where he's won. Even before he was champion, there was a 10 rounder he was in. Again, the guy's name escapes me. It was before he even fought Lomachenko, where Russell hurt his hand very early on in that fight and was reduced to basically just going through the fight as a one-handed fighter, picking it up on points. So Russell's had a history of that, but this did appear almost like his shoulder kind of went almost. Now, in between rounds, because his punch output dropped dramatically at that stage, Russell Jr.'s did, and Russell is he throws it. He's not like crazy or anything like that in terms of, but he normally throws a lot more punches than that. He is a good boxer, and he had to utilise his boxing in this fight. He had to use his movement. He was basically a one-handed fighter. I mean, Russell's jab output went to pretty much zero thereafter. Like, he literally barely threw that right hand, if at all, because he really just, you could tell there was an injury there. And going from the 6th round into the 7th round, the Showtime feed, we're actually speaking with Russell's brother in the corner, and we're just simply asking him, is there an injury there? To which he said, there's no injury, he's just not throwing it. I was like, he's injured. You can clearly tell that this was a one-arm fighter in there. It was so obvious. Now, even as a one-arm fighter, Russell did have success later on in the fight. When he warmed into the fight, his boxing was doing the talk, and he was still getting caught with good shots from Magsayo, it has to be said. But Russell was definitely picking up more of the later rounds. He was kind of coming into it a bit more. And that's not what you tend to see with Gary Russell. I suspect if this was a fully fit Gary Russell, he'd have won this fight. He would have been able to do more in the later stages when he warmed into the fight than he did early on. Or than he did, in the later rounds in this fight, I should say. Because, he would have warmed into the fight. He would have had both arms and would have been a lot better for him. Having said that, it was still a very close fight. Russell Jr. is a fighter who really irritates the hell out of me. And I don't mean that from a personal point of view. I mean it in a sense of this is such a wasted of a talent. He has reduced himself to fighting once a year for the last, 6 years. And this is a very, very athletically gifted fighter. I was going to say welterweight. Why am I saying welterweight? Featherweight. Very, very gifted featherweight. Probably the quickest hands in boxing. I'd say they probably will slow down a little bit now, but they're still very quick. Very good boxing ability. Good punching power. Takes a decent shot. He's a tremendous fighter. When he was certainly close to his prime. At the age of 33 now, given all the activity, given the fact that he is somewhat injury prone, maybe he'll move up. I don't know, but definitely it's opened up the featherweight division. And there's been a lot of guys coming out with the blue in the featherweight division over the last year, hasn't there, when you think about it? You have Mauricio Lara, who came out of nowhere. You have now Mark Magsayo, who's literally come out of the blocks now. He used to be a BC champion. You also have Kiko Martinez was able to reclaim a title there. Josh Warrington knocking around. There's a lot of guys though who come out with the blue over the last year, and I think Magsayo was one of them. I say Mauricio Lara. Him against Lara would be a very good fight. I wouldn't mind seeing that fight if they could get that done. Because I think Lara has been very hard done by. And he beat Josh Warrington, has a draw with him. Unlucky to get the draw with the headbutt, and he's just kind of see you later. Who needs you? And so that's that. Let me know your thoughts on the fight like that. I expected Russell to win, so I didn't really do any predictions on it. But I did think I think people will be talking about Russell in a sense of he'd win, but not looking good. I didn't think he'd lose. So there's the first kind of big loss of 2022. So is that a precursor for things to come? Who knows? For now, I'll leave you with that. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you could, lads and lasses, smash the like button. I'm trying to get back into the routine of Sunday streams, so we'll probably do one this evening, probably maybe about 6:30, 7 o'clock. We'll go live for a bit. It's a good day here in Ireland. It's a very good weekend. Basically, on Friday, the Taoiseach announced that we are pretty much back to normal. And I gotta tell you people, it's pretty, the mood here in this country is pretty freaking great. Really is. It's been brilliant. It's been brilliant. It's been hard for someone like me who chose to manage his own healthcare. Hasn't even been able to drink a coffee indoors. So yeah, that was the first thing I did yesterday. I went for a coffee indoors with a book, and I made the most of that. But you want to hear about that? We'll talk about other things later on. For now, I'll leave you with that.